Hi, Adelyn. Thank you for finding the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm glad you were able to take the time and able to, have me on your podcast.
Cool. My first question is really big and broad, and it's really for me to have a kind of roadmap for where the rest of the conversation might go. So just keep that in mind as I ask you, what experiences in your life, past or present, and other parts of who you are have most strongly informed your understanding of what it means to be a woman?
That's really broad. I think one of the things that I've been trying to do recently is try to network a little bit more and create a little bit more of a community for myself and others among sex workers, which is obviously majority women. And one of the things that I've always experienced in my personal life is that I find that the way that women kind of almost like validate whether they want to be friends with someone or like validate whether they respect or like someone seems to be through like identity based terms, like who you're associated with or who you're friends with or what communities you're a part of, whether that's like what your job is or, who you know on social media or who you have mutuals with or the like kind of the identity clusters that you can be put into. And I've always kind of been confused because it doesn't seem like men do this as much. And I could be biased on this because obviously men are not going to do this as much with their interactions with me, if especially there's covert intentions. And separately though, even in the conversations that I've heard among men, it seems like there's a lot more of this like kind of depersonalized topic based interactions that are happening. And that's the way that people are validating each other. I was recently at this like conference and there was a bunch of men who were talking and I kind of was in their like general vicinity where I wasn't actually in the conversation and I was kind of able to be eavesdropping. I was just like on my computer and booking flights, I'm pretty sure. But there was a bunch of men and they were kind of in this group and they were just talking about planes. And they were all like adding specific comments about the like design aspects of this like plane and what they liked about it and how many like pistols it had and what the horsepower of the engine was and all these specific aspects of the way that it was designed and how they thought that it was like special and what, commercial flights were like versus like domestic flights. And it was just like, I didn't really understand what they were talking about.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I appreciate that like story as a frame for like your big broad theories. Sounds like you have. Yeah, that's like a very commonly stereotyped, I think, phenomenon. Like men connect and relate over things, facts, information, sports. Women connect over like people, social dynamics. Um, this feels like I'm like, wow, we're getting into stereotypes quickly here.
think that this is like, uh, I got into a pretty big fight about this, but I don't think, um, I don't, I guess I mean sort of in like a sort of like broad ways. This could be like partially social. Like of course like there's some element of like I'm not saying this is naturally like ingrained in people. But there is probably some element of um like I find that like when uh interacting with like a lot of times people seem to get like upset if you like too immediately go to like advice
Yes.
advice when they're telling you some type of like emotional thing. So I imagine there is like some perhaps like some type of like social signaling where uh people are expecting that you're going to give them like emotional like support, and like perhaps it's like more comfortable or more accepted that women are going to give like emotional support, so therefore that it becomes like not only like expected, but like rewarded. And there's like some element of like if someone dies and you don't say like, oh, I'm so sorry, like
Mhm.
there's not like, obviously it's not helping with the situation to say like, oh, I'm sorry, like that doesn't immediately make anyone feel better. But if you don't do that, it's a little bit like, wait, why are you not like participating in this like social game or like social like civil like pleasantries? So I imagine there's probably some element of like women are used to being like this is like the way that is rewarded to be interacting. So therefore it is like if you do
Mhm.
not do it, it is like then you're being like thought of as like more like antisocial or something like that. I think a lot of this isn't, if it's not like, naturally ingrained, it's like something that becomes like socially ingrained. Like I'm not saying like I think a lot of this, even if it's not like some type of like stereotype, and I don't think it's universal to any extent, it's like something that's like becoming sort of like rewarded as like some type of like frame.
Okay. So we're parsing out like an innate or genetic disposition to be empathetic or emotionally compassionate versus like some social reward to like do what everyone else is doing and
Yeah, like I
don't
imagine.
defect or be divergent among the other people in the group.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is like totally true. Like one of um my friends who's doing some type of like some work for me right now in terms of like automation and general like programming. Uh she has like very much like what I've like referred to as like uh man brain in a way. Like she's very kind of like a reactive and also um like her like communication style is like very blunt. Or even like the compliment she gave me yesterday, she said to me, she was like, oh, I really appreciate how you're like not consensus driven in conversations, which immediately I was like confused about, and like I wasn't sure if it was like a backhanded compliment. uh but I would say like the sort of like what she was saying is that she has like this like desire for like deliberately filtering for like disagreeability in some extent. And she
Mm-hmm.
said that she has like a hard time finding female friendships because she finds that like sort of any sort of like inclination towards like not being immediately um like appeasing or immediately trying to like go for like the example she gave is she said she's like, oh, you'll come to me with like a problem or a like to complain about something. And uh she said like you're the answer you're not looking for is like validation that you're correct. She said that like you'll get like she said that I get apparently if she just gives me like, oh wow, like that sounds so hard, or like, oh wow, like it sounds like how could that person do that, that's so like cruel, like that I like kind of get annoyed because I like don't find it like helpful feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Or like not uh like I'm not like looking for someone to like immediately just like validate my like experience of something. And I'm not immediately looking for like agreement that like I am correct or like I'm having some type of like synchrony about like an experience. She had like a couple of other sort of like examples, but I thought that was like really interesting. And I do think that there's like some extent of either whether like social or like innate of uh like a different sort of almost like way of interaction that's like rewarded among like men versus women that I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. So for you personally, do your female friendships fall into that the stereotypical or common like consensus seeking, being agreeable, or I guess I'm curious, like, is your friendship with the programmer, is that atypical or atypical for your female friendships?
Um, One of the things that I like actually deliberately filter for in women is probably disagreeability.
Okay.
Like, not disagreeability as in um, like neuroticism, like not some element of like anger or uh, like not some element of like anger or like general like bad mood. Like what I'm like find myself filtering for is like some uh like higher degree of self-efficacy and like more like predisposition to like disagreeing or like voicing their like needs, even if it's not like immediately convenient for everyone around them, like kind of like some element of like anti-people pleasing tendencies. Um, I think that this is like some sort of like desire in me to like filter for authenticity, because obviously like not everyone that is authentic is disagreeable, but people that are like willing to be disagreeable to like give their opinions are probably likely to be like semi more authentic than the norm.
This brings to mind for me the idea of expressing or sharing boundaries, which can be more of like a man-woman dynamic. But even in like friendships, people have different preferences over like how often they want to hang out or what they want to do together. So if someone like there's just a phenomenon just irrespective of gender where if someone just like is kind of passive in a friendship and they build resentment over time because they do things in friendship context they don't actually want to do until it just like explode one day, that's just like not being a good friend. You should have expressed like, hey, I don't actually want to go and do this thing. But instead
So
they
just
were being people pleasy and uh
yeah,
yeah, not willing to be disagreeable about what they actually want.
yeah. I think there's also the like, have you heard of the term of like ask versus like guess culture?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was like one of the things that I was like obsessed with as like a frame. I think I kind of like will develop like a strong frame that I'm like viewing the world with, and then I'll like sort of view everything through it, or at least like a couple of frames that I'll like develop, and I'll like be really interested in it for a couple of weeks as like a new method of like communication. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll kind of like integrate it and then like forget it as like a but one of the things that I thought was interesting is that like my mother is Russian and my father is Spanish. Um, but one of the things that I always thought was interesting is that growing up, like if my mom found out that you were like annoyed and you like didn't say anything, you would get like in trouble almost,
Yeah.
which is so the opposite, I think, of what normal people experience. So it's this kind of like experience of uh like if I was upset about a situation and I didn't like and I was then in like perhaps a bad mood or I like didn't figure out like some way to verbalize it, uh she would just be like she's like, what? Like you're not saying anything. You're like letting yourself just be like in an upset mood and you're not letting me help you. Like, why are you doing that? That's like so rude. Like, and I think a lot of people have the opposite view where like if you're asking for too much or if you're being like too direct about uh like um if you're like one of the things that I think is interesting is that sometimes I'll be in someone's house and we'll be like hanging out and I'll be like, oh, by the way, where are your water glasses? Um, and then they'll be like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like I should have offered you water." Like, and I was like, "No, I wasn't thirsty until right now. I'm like I didn't need you to offer me water. Like I'm now thirsty. Where are your water glasses?"
Oh
Like,
yeah.
yeah, I'm like I don't like I'm like asking you because I'm like trying to create less work for you. Like, just tell me the like I am fine with tap water. I'm easy. Like, where is the like what cabinet do you have your water glass in? And I can just get water for myself. Um, and I like don't mind that, but it was like interesting because a lot of the stuff that like the articles I've read on like ask versus guess culture are this sort of like separation of um like I remember reading a couple of like guess people's like answers and they're just like if someone has like the audacity to like ask me for something but like and like what am I gonna have to do? I'm gonna have to say no. They're gonna make me say no to them. That's so rude. Like that's so rude to put that like sort of like pressure on me. And it's interesting 'cause
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a kind of culture that was like totally the opposite. It's like you're just expecting me to like read your mind. Like that's such a like level of like presumption and like sort of
Right.
um that's such like a level of like entitlement that like no one is capable of.
Yeah, like a guest culture person can view and ask a question or request as like an obligation or an accusation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
I forgot the original reason why I brought that up.
You have your theories or frameworks for like social just social phenomenon that you integrate and you move on to something else? It sounded like you mentioned something like that earlier.
Yeah, I had a reason to bring it up, but
Hmm.
I can't remember why.
Sure.
It's gonna come to me. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I just think it's like it's kind of interesting having this like I find like having like the framework is like really interesting for trying to figure out how to interact with people or trying to figure out how to be like gracious towards people in terms of
Hmm.
yeah.
You can't ensure it'll be a great interaction for both of you because the way you want to interact and the way they want to interact may be like incompatible in some ways.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I've always thought that was like really helpful, I guess.
Hmm. Hmm. I wonder, like, uh, would it be useful to go meta on it? Like, do you ever go meta? Like, hey, new friend, are you an ask or a guest person? Like, I'm curious how I guess you approach like new connections. If the goal is
Yeah.
like sussing out like what's the right level of connection for you too.
Mm. I think most people don't seem to have like they don't seem to have like this inherent framework.
Hmm.
And if it's like not integrated enough into their like worldview to kind of even like use language like that. Like I
Yeah.
think they have an idea of like what's rude, uh, but they don't have like it's not sort of demoralized. Um, like I remember, first hearing about this and speaking to someone about like dating preferences, and I said to them, like for example, the thing of like splitting the check. I remember
Hmm.
saying to them like, oh, like that seems like, for example, like you would just look for someone that's like compatible like with what your like cultural norms are. Um, and she's like, no, like I just want someone who's like generous and gracious and like, like and knows how to like treat a woman. And I was like, right. I was like, I don't think people that are like splitting expenses is like domestic abuse or anything. Like I don't think it's like you're like abusing a woman.
Hmm.
I just think that like you're probably like incompatible in terms of like what your like civilities or like what the things that like make you feel good are and or like what your like love language is if you even want to use that and and I think that like you can't deliberately filter for like traits because people have different forms of like how they express their traits or what the like cultural norms of like what doing something means to another person.
Hmm.
One of the like I guess weird iterations that I've like seen of this is that like uh I think because I'm like perhaps more inclined towards like ass culture
Hmm.
um sort of situations like the odd thing about that I've noticed in like sex work is that there's a lot more like guest culture like interactions. um I don't know if this is like uh some extent of like there being a lot of explicit rules so then everything else is like a lot more covert. uh but um like one of the things that I thought was like interesting is that like sometimes I'll like have a client that I'll like really enjoy, meeting, and I'll have like a really positive interaction with them, and I'll be like, oh, like this was really lovely. Like if you, uh, like I would love to see you again. Like um, if like you should let me know what your like next availability is, or if you like have availability like next month, I'd love to see you. When I'm like, I'm booked up until here, but like I'm letting you know that I'm free this month. And I noticed there was like a lot of like awkwardness around that. Uh,
Hmm.
like there would be like sort of uncomfortable like reactions or like kind of like awkwardness around saying something as explicit as that. And I have some sense of like um I don't know if like perhaps there's also some element of like being more of a like sort of like there being like I'm on the passive like counterparty, like I'm almost in this like thing of like I'm sitting up in my like uh my sort of like ivory tower, like waiting to be booked. But there was like some like it's interesting because I have like, really explicit like here's what my time is per hour and like here's what my rate is and here's what my policy for this social interaction and this is what my policy for this social interaction is. But saying something like as explicit as like a like, oh, it'd be nice to see you again. Here's my calendar. Um was like sort of like almost like too like forward or something like that. And I found that like I had a lot more,
Oh.
yeah, like I would have like a lot of times um someone would like reach out like a week later and they'd be like, I want to see you again. But like if I said anything too forward, like here's my calendar, it would make them like sort of like they would not want to commit immediately to something. Or like not that I was asking for commitment immediately, but like people would feel really like me being too forward about my availability had like kind of like a weird reaction. Um, and I like have found like just kind of being like or even like compliments that are too like forward, there seems to be some type of like constant questioning of like or constant questioning of like my level of like authenticity or like genuineness because I think there's so many things
Mm.
of like so many social expectations on the other side of like being unsure how genuine I am in different ways. Um like yeah, like I've found this like really in like really interesting. Um yeah. I wish there was like I almost wish that I had like a larger aggregate of like data, many other like escorts when I'm asking them like explicit questions about like, oh, what is like this form of like interaction have like good answers? Because I don't know if they're like explicitly thinking of like, let me think through all of like the requests or ways that I've like phrased things or like, types of interactions I've had. I think a lot of more people are just kind of like uh perhaps like not trying to develop like some type of sort of like thought pattern, I guess. Not that um like I feel like I'm like trying to do this as like a method of like not being rude. Like it's not like some like greater like larger scheme. I'm just like, oh God, I don't want to come off as rude and like this is like a weird place where this is like there's not explicit social norms. I thought there was when I first got started, and I'm realizing I'm very wrong. Yeah.
Oh,
Mm.
wow. Yeah, there's a really whole universe of uh probably pretty unique social interactions, like the intersection of like sex work, money, like courtship, attraction. Uh like what stood out to me the most was like the idea of like a guy books you the first time. He's like the
Mm.
pursuer quotes, and you're like receiving his desire, whatever quotes, and money is exchanged. Um, but then you express interest for another booking, which like introduces a whole new like, oh, you also desire back, or you are like a pursuer now in some degree just by saying that, which is like off kilter or like that's new.
Well,
And there's not really a corollary to like find a broader like this doesn't really apply to dating super much because you want some reciprocal interest is natural even in the beginning. Like this is like a really this seems like really isolated potentially to like sex work type dynamics. And there's I don't know if there is corollary to like dating or friendships and things, but it's really fascinating, at least within the realm of sex work.
Yeah, it is weird. There's like some element of like rewarded unavailability or something.
Hmm.
Like um rewarded unavailability and also um mm, like some element of also like I noticed this like sometimes this uh like even the idea of like being like too explicit about like your like experience. It seems to be like the authenticity of my like reactions seems to be like constantly being like tested in a way that and also one of the things that I've found interesting is that like I wrote about this. I found it interesting how like I find um in dating there's kind of this like structure of it being like really rewarded that you are um restrained in a way. Like there's almost like a lot more sort of like testing that seems to be done in like dating or like this
Hmm.
like I have this desire to like prove myself to you. I don't know if this is like a like internal experience that I experience with like dating sometimes. I noticed for like a while when I was when I was actually putting attention towards dating, there was like this uh like I can't come off too um interested in you because like there is some amount of like devaluing of status when you are like too interested in someone else in dating. And I found that
Hmm.
like it's really interesting because there's almost like sometimes this more like indulgence of like romance, ironically, in escorting, where like because
Hmm.
there's almost this like boundary of like what the extent of the relationship can be. You can do a lot more like extravagant sort of like romantic gestures that I find that like wouldn't otherwise be available in normal dating. Like some
Wow.
element of yeah, I find this really fascinating. Like there is like some element of um like for example, uh one of my clients who I really enjoy our time with like or I guess like different clients. I've had clients who've bought me like thousands of dollars of gifts before meeting me. Um and like our first date is like a 24-hour date. Um and I had this like I've had clients who book like whole itineraries based off of like little details that I've tweeted about and like little details that I have in my like copy that and this like would be considered like stalkerish behavior if it wasn't like in escorting. Like there's a joke kind of like the only difference between like a stalker and like a rom-com is like how hot the protagonist is.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of this like there's like this automatic like reciprocality in escorting. It's like why would I not like this person? Like they're like automatically like successful, like they're automatically successful. They've like gone through like the various hoops and barriers to like see me, such as like filling out a booking form and attaching legal information and putting themselves like at risk in a way that's like really kind of like vulnerable and flattering. And often they've sent me like really nice like page-long intros where they've like said about themselves and about their interests and about like I don't know like their dog and like and like they've had like and there's also obviously the like financial sort of um incentive, but there's all these like sort of factors of just like really people just being very charming in a way that like people don't put effort into normal like dating and normal courtship that I
Hmm.
find like very charming. And I think it almost makes it so that uh like I've spoken to clients how it's like it makes it's a little bit more like fun than like normal like dating or I've even had clients that are like very attractive that come see me and I've had almost like the question of this like this person is like a lot of my clients personally are like young and single
Hmm.
like probably like 80% of my clients are like single and in their 30s.
Hmm.
And I think that like this seems to be a particular to my branding thing that is like uh but I mean even the clients that I have that are like married or in relationships, they're generally like in happy relationships. Like I've never had a client ever complain to me about their relationship or say that they're in an unhappy relationship or feel as though they're like trying to like get away from something in some way. Um, but there seems to be this like really nice indulgence of dating that almost like the more I escort, the like less I have desire for personal dating, simply because so
Hmm.
serious. And it's like, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
often people have this experience because like maybe they're like sexually burnt out or something like that.
Hmm.
But like I tend to find that like I'm just uh and I think part of this is like the gamification of like online dating and the gamification of like social interactions and also the fact that like with online stuff, people feel like less desire to be too like forthright. I've heard this is also a Me Too thing, that like it's like uncomfortable to go up to someone and be like, "Wow, you're really beautiful. I'd love to take you on a date," and that's like considered like creepy or weird. Um, but one of the things that like there really is like this kind of like nice indulgence of dating that I imagine like must be also really nice on the opposite side of like you have all this like like kind of money, and you have all this like time where you're like working, and like you probably are more like very emotionally exhausted, and like being able to kind of have this experience where you're like able to like indulge in something that is very like romantic and very like sort of uh like indulgent and special and like intense, I think is like really unique. I don't know, like it's I'm really like every time I have like a like 24-hour like a multi-day date, I like feel like very like fulfilled and like charmed from it. Like I find it I think I have like a larger social battery, or like a more like easily renewed social battery than most people.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's like a really interesting uh it's a really interesting like market in a way. Like on my Tristat, I have this like joke where it's like Tris is like the most efficient market maker, like dating market maker,
Mm-hmm.
almost, because it's like you're getting people at like the highest values, like the highest sexual market value. Like it's literally like a direct sexual market value of society, and then you're like setting them up in this like way where it's being like rewarded based off of what society is like um inexplicitly like rewarding people for anyway.
Yeah, because how do you make the money
I don't
to?
know. I find it,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, I find it really,
What really sticks out here to me is the idea of, as you described the interactions with clients, like um, it's very constrained as opposed to like just free, open-ended dating, courtship, romance. And so I think like as usually like constraints can breed creativity, like restrictions can help foster freedom within like the box you and another person help establish. Um, because it's so limited. You're going to be together. I don't know sex work. I'm assuming like you and the client for a day or whatever. Um, they get to like the client, I assume, gets to experience a better like risk reward ratio than might be present in normal dating. Like he gets to make a big grand romantic gesture. You probably won't be terrified or run away from that. You'll probably love it. If a guy does a
yeah,
thing in an early date that's similarly romantic and grand, um, he might not be attuned to her energy. He might be like coming on too strongly, or there's potential like social rejection if she tells her friends like this guy was way too eager. Mm-hmm.
hi, my computer died.
Okay, I feared like there's some, I don't know, a friend in North Austin saying there's some like outage across town.
No, no, it's just me. I like constantly dying electronics. I would have such good ROI if I started just like having an Amazon subscription for like chargers, and I've lost so many chargers. So many have been lost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Luckily,
I'm
your
back.
next client will hear this. They'll buy you every possible never lose a charger or 10 chargers or whatever, so you'll be set
I know
soon.
I need to get like 10 super speed chargers.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Um,
so yeah, you were saying about
yeah, I basically like
yeah.
wanted to mention what I've seen as far as like adverse pressures in dating that don't seem to be present from what you're describing in sex work. Men and women
Mhm.
fear like social and or romantic uh, reprisal is not the right word. Just consequences for doing things that might feel natural to them, but are not attuned to the other person necessarily. That dynamic seems to be absent or like less of a thing in sex work from what you're describing.
Yeah, I think that there's like less like uh it's yeah, there's like less like repercussions for like sort of more explicit behavior, I guess, or like explicit sort of um like explicit romance. So I
Right.
find that like really quite nice. I find that like um when I was like uh dating, like the last person I dated was like a quant, and they worked like I had the opposite of that. I had the like someone who worked like 60 or 70 hours a week. And when I saw them, it would be really nice. Like it would be like we'd have dinner and we'd like be able to like have our like time, but it was like very much like restricted in a way that like I found like it's been like a lot more like sort of like romantically indulgent, I think. Um I imagine this is also just like the extent of wealth that like I'm encountering, that there's people who just like have a lot more free time and I'll have a lot more like sort of ability to like um sort of like move their calendars around and such. But I found that like even in New York there seems to be like this kind of experience of people dating and there being almost like a refusal to have like deep investment in like individuals, or that like things will, I'll hear from like girlfriends that like things that will mean like a lot more like holding hands will be like a really dramatic like things that are like traditionally like affectionate
Mm.
things like holding hands or like cuddling will be things that are like really dramatic and that like will like mean a lot. Like I once had this like client that was very attractive, um and he said that he saw like sex workers because he like found that like when he like hooked up with people from like Hinge or Bumble or like just like dating apps, or like even from a bar, there was like almost this like it would be too forward to like be like cuddling in bed and kind of like talking about like the extent of like the story of your life
Mm.
or whatever, like weird details of like your kind of your life story, or your like things would be or like you can't kind of like or like it's difficult to like put yourself in like a bad light. Um and and he found with like sex workers that like he kind of could do that. Like he could put himself in like a like that, like he could say things about himself that wouldn't be like particularly like flattering himself, like sort of be like around a lot more like see like cuddling and like this sort of like petting someone's hair and stuff like that, that he found that like he didn't experience in like his regular like dating. He was like I think like late 20s or something like that like um
Hmm.
and I thought that was really interesting and like kind of like ironic, not what you'd expect. Like, oh, I saw like I went and saw a prostitute and it was like way better than Hinge. Like, like
Yeah.
she was so nice to me. Like, and I thought that was like kind of interesting. I don't know. Or at least like interesting as in I obviously like I'm not like a man going around um having sex on dating apps, so I don't really know what the like experience is overall.
Hmm.
But I've even noticed this, like I never had any personal social media. Like I had Instagram for like a year or two in high school, but before getting Twitter, which is hilarious because I think I'm like absolutely cracked at Twitter. I think I'm like really, really good at algorithm.
Mm.
But like before getting Twitter 2 years ago, I didn't have any like form of social media. And I found that like when I was in college, it was this interesting thing where like people would find it really forward when I like had just met someone and I had like a conversation with them, and I'd be like oh, like can I have your number, like, and I'd be like, oh, do you want to like, or I'd like, and then I would like text them and be like, what are you doing like right now, you want to get lunch with me? Not even like in a like they would presume like this would probably be okay, uh this would be okay if it was like these types of like very explicit like interaction based things are okay if they're in a sexual context, but I
Mm.
found that like people found it weird friendship wise.
Mm.
And I kind of would say to people like I'd be like, okay, well, I'm not gonna get your Instagram, we're not gonna do like the parasocial like following each other and like liking each other's things and like you being able to like see or stalk my life in some way. So I was like, if I'm like not gonna ask for your number, or and like I'm not gonna like explicitly ask that we like hang out again, I literally will probably never see you again.
Right.
And I find that just like things that force like interactions to be like more authentic or more genuine are like really rewarding for me. I also found like one of the weird things is like in terms of if we're talking back to like womanhood, like I found that like that sort of interaction would be like very weird for many women. Like this would be totally okay if I asked like a man to do this, or if I asked even like a woman to do this with like the expectation of like some type of like uh some type of like sexual slash romantic intent.
Mm-hmm.
But this would be considered like weird if it was like me doing it like just propositioning a woman like this in terms of like, hey, I think you're cool. Do you want to get like coffee with me? Like this would be fun. And I found a lot of like I would get a lot of negative reactions from women when I
Mm-hmm.
tried to do this. Especially if like I hadn't known them or if I met them like in a random social event or in like a random like class or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like if I were to be doing this, like sexually propositioning people, it wouldn't get this like same reaction, which made me
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit sad. Um,
Hmm. I wonder again if just like as things we having with dating, I'm not clued into female friend courtships.
um,
Do I wonder if they want more just like being in each other's social media orbit first, like liking each other's posts or
yeah,
responding first
I,
before the another in-person meet? Like, are
I
you?
think that this
Mhm.
is uh what I was talking about with like identity validation before. Like there being some type of like, oh, I know you because I know, you know, Samantha and you know Samantha.
Yeah,
Um, and Samantha is just a random name, but
right.
like there being some type of like validation, social validation of that. And I find that like unless you have or like, oh, like I can see what like mutuals we have on like social media, or like um oh like the, you know, some element of like or validation that seems to be like quite like it seems to be inaccurate a lot of times because people's like method of like validating or like verifying who they think is like cool or legitimate or like trustworthy is not consistent. Um, it's like, yeah, I found that like one time a woman did this to me. She was like, "Oh, do you want to get coffee?" Like after one of my classes, we were both like very active in the class. It was like some type of like it was a like regulation of like financial products class. Um, and I think she worked for like JP Morgan or something. So she was like really active in the class, and I just took the class because I thought it was interesting. And after the class, once we were both speaking to the professor, and she asked me like, "Oh, do you want to get coffee?" And I was like, "Sure, I'd love to get coffee." And then she's like, "I have to run some like errands right now." And she's like, "If you want to like come with me, like, you're welcome to come." And I was like, "Well, I don't have my next class until like 7, so sure." And we ended up like just like walking around, and we like one of the things she needed to do is she needed to like, I don't know, she needed to do something, she needed to like pick up a package from her apartment or something, one of the things. And we were like in her apartment, and she'd given me water, I didn't have to ask. And we were like sitting on her couch, and um it's not until like she was telling me like, "Oh wow, you look like really like my ex-girlfriend," that I was like, "Damn it, she's hitting on me." I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh man," I was like, "I thought you were breaking you were breaking the stereotype I had
Mhm.
of like it being like there being the explicit rules um
Mhm.
allowed for just allowed for like non-sexual interactions, but no, this was a red
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, bummer.
I know it was a huge bummer. I was really sad about this. Yeah.
Admittedly, um, I, I've mused on Twitter where like, how do women ever get together? Because if they're both like used to being like more passive or like waiting for someone else to initiate things, lesbian bed death, nothing ever happens. But it sounds like she was bucking that trend at least to like be a pursuer, in a sapphic context. But that's not what you wanted. So,
Yeah. I found it to be like really difficult to um like I found this to be like unless I have like explicit social ties with women, sometimes this being like really difficult. I used to throw like kind of pretty constant like parties, like I'd host like parties and debates and stuff. And I found this to be like kind of helpful in terms of like um also creating some type of level of like social intimacy of like people that I wouldn't necessarily like proposition to hang out with one-on-one, but that like when we were in a like party setting, they would like consistently show up to my parties or something. I found that to be really fun. And I also like found the like sort of like speed conversations to be really kind of like validating to something in my like mind and also creating like communities. But it has generally been really tough. Like one of the things that I like have done recently that I have like a pretty great network of like female friends right now. Um, but one of the things that like has kind of changed is that like a lot of the friends that I'm like interacting with, um, it's interesting. Like I've recently started interacting with like a lot more sex workers, and I
Mhm.
find that like I'll set up I'll have like more project-based interactions. And I find this is like really great. Like this is um like I have a couple of friends where we uh like rant to each other about like Twitter algorithm stuff or like different branding stuff or like different um like one of my friends will like talk about like different like historical sites or like stuff that we're like thinking about like making like a whole series of uh like a whole article and we're gonna like visit different historical sites. Or like another one of my friends uh like this is like I guess I should say like this is like there's my friend her name is like Sheridan will like talk about like different types of like historical based stuff because she has this whole like historical branding. And then I found other people that like will be talking about like security or like different methods of like how to like be encrypting and how to be like keeping as many things as safe as possible. Like um whether like apparently there's something that I just like learned today that apparently all the different forms of like security that like Proton Mail keeps are kind of irrelevant because the like methods of encryption only work if you're doing like a Proton Mail to Proton Mail, but they don't become encrypted anymore when you're interacting with Gmail.
Hmm.
Um
Interesting.
and yeah, which
It
is
sounds
kind
it's
of
like a very like male brain flavor conversation you're having with other women.
so happy about it. But it's not, but it is like to a certain extent, like it's not male brain. It's like project based work. And we're talking about like, I don't know, like there's like a lot of elements of, that, I mean, that's a whole nother thing that there being this kind of like weird, um, there is like, this kind of like weird levels of like, uh, I think there's like some paranoia sometimes when interacting with like other sex workers if some people want to like exclusively talk about like work-based stuff and some people want to like are like why are you only trying to talk to me about like work-based stuff. And I have this like other friends that I'm doing like some she has like this whole consulting brand or like her name is like she's like Caroline Kelly and she um will talk like pretty explicitly about like what the different like she's been in the industry longer and what the different like social dynamics that she's noticed or like what the different like she's been able to be like, oh, there's like a couple years ago there was these sort of like groups that would happen and like, oh, here are some of like the social interactions that I've like noticed or like here are some of the like explicit like in-person things or the
Hmm.
ways that people feel like comfortable communicating like online and like here are the like and I found that to be like really nice and like rewarding. uh there being some type of like explicit rule-based and like communication about that. um and I've found like I just feel much more like rewarded uh or not like we're like incentivized to be having like much heavier social interactions when I'm like working so much because it feels like there's like some amount of like productive sociability almost like that is like really nice. Like it's almost like, oh, we're going to continue to talk about like that thing that we were talking about before. Or like I'm like one of the things that I find like a deep amount of like satisfaction from is like uh again from what I was like explicitly saying at the beginning of the call that I've noticed there's some amount of like I'm gonna give you. I once met this woman and she was like would explicitly say like when you were telling me this story, do you want like support, like some amount of like emotional support? Do you want like advice? Or do you just want me to like listen to you? And she would like explicitly say that before like interactions.
Hmm.
And I found that like it was interesting because no one had ever said that in such an explicit way. But I found that like that a lot of times people will want you to like validate the like feelings that they're going through, or like even like for a while I would like try to like name the feelings. Like I'd be like, oh, that sounds like very like frustrating, or like that sounds like it must be really exhausting having to deal with like that specific, and then say like a specific part of the story. Which just like sort of feels like this like kind of uh trying to make sure that you have some element of like synchronicity about like what the actual feelings that they're having and what the parts that are like often when people are speaking, they're like not understanding the like parts of a story or parts of a like narrative that are actually having like impact. And
Mm.
I found this to be like or like one of the modes that I'll go into is that like I really enjoy like problem solving, like some element of like, oh, uh like here's how I think that this would be helpful in this way. And that's like the like state my brain like automatically goes into. And I had to like slow myself down and be like, okay, like let me try to like name the actual feelings that are impacting you in all these ways and like figure out exactly what element of the story is actually like significant. Uh so I don't know if people often understand this themselves when they're like um narrating like a story or narrating a problem.
Hmm. Yeah. Regardless of whether it's seeking support or problem solving or both with like sharing a story. I imagine like the storyteller values attunement. Like, are you with me? Like when you reflect, like, oh, it seems like this part and that part stands out. Does that resonate with the storyteller? Like, do they agree? Oh, yeah, that does stand out. Or like, do they find some insight because of your reflection? Like, oh, they've learned something about themselves because of what you notice or what stands out to you
Yeah,
as the listener. Yeah, regardless of whether it's problem solving or support, I find like people just like value being known, like knowing they're being like listened to and actually cared about
totally.
in either mode. Hmm. Um, where do you want to go from here?
I don't know.
Hmm.
I guess those are like the what are the do you generally have like a list of questions that you like go from, or do you kind of just like sort of start on like the vague question of like womanhood and like sort of like go from there?
I have a list of
Mm,
questions. Usually the things mentioned at the start will go for a while, but I want to be with this conversation. So I think I'll mention or bring up a tweet I saw. I was like searching your name plus like womanhood or woman or femininity.
totally.
One thing
Yeah,
stood out.
I had a couple of tweets that I like posted on this and they got really bad engagement. So I like stopped posting my like thoughts on social interactions.
Yeah, like only 19,000 views, not great. But on May 1st of this year, 2024, you tweeted, when women do, quotes, fat shaming behavior, they aren't actually shaming the fat. They're saying, why do you think you don't have to follow rules the rest of us follow? It's the same reason people hate sluts, pick me girls, or girl bosses, even if they're technically different and contradicting traits. Women's social value is based on conformity and by signaling disregard of those social rules. It's somehow taken as a larger disregard of the work women have to put into, quotes, be a woman.
Yeah, that's definitely a like would I get canceled for this tweet? But turns out people on porn account don't really care.
Yeah, two
Oh,
replies.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that uh yeah, I definitely also separately have like some thoughts on like women's like sexuality, but I think on like that particular tweet, like there seems to be this uh like on all those like separate examples, I forgot the exact ones that like
Sluts,
I
pick me girls, girl bosses.
yeah, so like there seems to be like I think all of those like there seems to be kind of like opposite traits. Like I like some element of like the fat shaming is like, hey, like there is this expectation that like everyone is as a woman is constantly being like bombarded with of like you should be skinny. And like people who like are not following that, they're almost like sort of like they're not following some like explicit rule.
Hmm.
Um, and also like with like people that are like slutty, like they're not following some like explicit rule of like the if you want to call it like female sort of expectations, like that you like and obviously this is like changes within culture, blah blah blah, but like to a certain extent, like women are not like it is considered the like ideal woman is like it's not, you're not supposed to be like, it's considered bad to be fat, like fat is bad. Or like being like too slutty or too like sort of devaluing the like value of sex is like considered like bad. It makes it like
Yeah.
um in like slutty behavior. Or like pick me is like some element of like pick me traits seem to be something of um like some element of like pick me is like differentiating themselves from other women in order to like seek male attention.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, like I like doing these like non-feminine things, or like, oh, I don't wear makeup. Uh and therefore like I am like better because I'm not like participating in these like female traits or expectations. Or even like the girl boss, like the reason people started hating girl bosses is because they're like, wait, no, you're like not all of your goals and like expectations are immediately trying to like save the rest of the human, like sorry, the rest of the like the female like race. Like why are you not doing that? Like that should be your like goal and like desire at all times.
Hmm.
um and it's like all of these are like methods of not like or like ways of not like immediately trying to like conform or like have some amount of I
Hmm.
almost want to call it like group behavior.
Yeah,
Like
I'm wondering about like this individual divergent behavior versus like what's good for the gender, the amorphous, vague gender group as a concept. If like a woman's fat and happy, um, how dare she? Because um,
because it's like I have to do that, what the fuck are you doing, you know?
yeah,
Like
I'm not allowed to be fat and happy.
like
Hmm.
yeah, it's like almost considered like entitlement almost. Or
Yeah.
like
Or if
um
a woman's a slut, like that lowers like the average expectation on guys in like romance or dating. So how dare you like lower the barrier required for guys to like get what they need in the dating whatever sex market.
there seems to be some element of like I've heard this be like a less tweeted that this is like there's like some like slut cloud effect that people with like that are being slutty are often just sleeping with other people that are slutty.
Right.
Uh I think I'm an exception to this because I like go for like nerds that like are not sleeping around and like
Hmm.
are like I tend to like going for like uh it's funny like one of the one of the people in the like uh plain autist groups I like was like ended up hitting on and seeing for a bit where I was like and he was just ignoring me the entire time and
Hmm.
like was just like really interested in talking about like planes like just like really interested and I was like wow this guy is like very attractive and has no interest on my opinion on plane my plane information is not good enough for him um and there was like some element of like I think at different points I like tried to get his attention and I think from this different like meeting I ended up hitting on like two different boys one of which was like very interested in like just talking about like planes and kept on like just going into like nerd discussions and I kept on like one really liking like the way that he like framed things and like said things. I thought he just seemed very like brilliant and like had a lot of um like crystallized intelligence, which I find really attractive. And there was another guy who like had like really extensive like chemistry knowledge, and I had several conversations that were like in sort of like in proximity to him where like he had really extensive chemistry knowledge and there was a couple times where we had like short interactions that were quite pleasant and then he would immediately like turn around and like uh want to like the guy who like knew a lot about like 3D printing and like the Einstein shape.
Oh
Like
yeah.
and I like found
Hmm.
like those, yeah like those are the people I go after. So like I think that like I'm probably some some expectation to the I'm like preying on nerds and I'm like having some exception to the like slight cloud effect um
Hmm.
that like there seems to be like a general yeah I tend to go for like nerds that are like very much not interested in sex,
Yeah.
which for better for me.
Adverse selection effect there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is,
yeah. I was
yeah,
gonna say I'm not like I think I'm an insider to this, but like it seems like Slut Cloud just seems like people who have a nerdy interest in sex itself. Like, how do we all
maybe.
fuck each other without like falling victim to like the social failure modes and sexual whatever romantic failure modes you can so often, I don't know, hit a Slut Cloud. Um,
Yeah,
what do you
I
think
don't know.
makes you go ahead?
No, I was just gonna say like I don't know if this is like people who are intellectualizing sex, but I tend to find in like communities that are like or places that are like have explicit like drives or interests in sex, there seems to be like some type of like I don't know if like selection also for like higher IQ that seems kind of interesting. I don't think it's just this, but I think it's probably more so like anyone who's like intellectualizing anything. You have this selection effect.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, sorry, you had a question before? What was your question?
Oh, just wondering, like, what do you think makes you different? To, like, go or find or draw in the or be attracted to these nerds who like don't have the sex interest.
What makes me attracted to them?
Well, we already went over
Uh,
that. Like,
I just like yeah, I'm probably just like filtering like way too hard on like uh some like form of like fluid and crystallized intelligence.
mhm.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so because your cancelable takes don't like get much traction on Twitter, is there anything else you'd care to like share that you've wanted to tweet but like didn't feel like it or for whatever reason didn't? But
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I have okay, so it was funny. So it's I'm like constantly kind of like I've been just crazy like busy recently. And I'm
Mhm.
like constantly like flying. So it's funny, like today was like one of my like only free days, but it's I was like trying to schedule this like meeting with you in between like what were the things I had to do? I went and like got my like went and got my like hair done while like answering like emails and like setting up some type of automation system, and then I had to like rush off to like a laser appointment. And like this weekend I was like working on like I'm like very lazy, but like I try to just like fix as many things permanently. So like one of the things I've been working on recently is trying to get as much like different forms of like laser skincare, so I don't need to worry about like actually having like actual skincare, like Fraxel laser and different forms of like CO2 or like IPL laser, as and
Mhm.
like microbladed eyebrows and like microbladed lips and like eyeliner. So I'm like wearing like permanent makeup constantly because like right now I'm not wearing any makeup, but like I have like
Huh.
permanent eyebrows, which is cool.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, but it was interesting scheduling this call about like womanhood while like rushing around like beauty
Oh,
appointments and being like,
bimboifying yourself and
yeah, I've been um
Um,
yeah, there was like a good like irony there. Yeah, one of the things um I guess also that like I have wanted to tweet about, but that like I haven't had like much like engagement is that like I have like one of the things that like um I've like had to like experiment with is like the sort of separation between like covert and like overt like sexuality that I've like wanted to tweet about but like haven't
mhm.
really got a ton of engagement, my general like sexuality or like woman tweets. So I haven't tweeted about this, though I
Yeah.
imagine this would if I like put it into a good thread structure or something like that, but threads are so annoying to reschedule and you can't reschedule them unless you have some one of these like illegal like API sort
Right.
of
Yeah.
things, and a lot of them are like banned by Twitter and like have gotten my account shadow banned before. Um, and I'm like at times that I've like tried to schedule out threads, it's been so much work and like the ROI has not been high on them. And it's like taken like so
Sure.
much of me being like bouncing around 1,000 times. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is like I have this theory on like covert versus like overt sexuality.
Hmm.
And it's a little bit of like this like separation of like people who will sometimes talk about like, oh, like you're pretty but you're not like beautiful, or you're like beautiful but you're not sexy, or you're like cute but you're not sexy. And there's like this kind of separation that like
Oh,
people don't really define very strongly.
yeah.
And I think also like like I think because also I have uh I'm quite thin. Like I think I have like a like 18.5 or like 19 BMI. But I have like very, very large breasts. So it kind of puts me in this like position of being able to like, depending on what I wear, I can still get
Um,
kind of like thinness privilege, while like not deciding like whether I want to be like overtly sexual based on just like whether I'm showing my like I'm wearing something tight or whether I'm like showing my like cleavage.
mhm.
And I've noticed like different ways that people interact with me based on this. Like one of the things is that like when I have more explicit cleavage, I've noticed that like the favors that people will give me are like a lot more overt. Like I noticed that I get like a lot like normally people just because like I'm attractive, will I will get like some amount of like people being nice to me or wanting to like have conversations with me or like um different things like one of the differences I've noticed recently is I've been dressing a lot sluttier to go to the airport because I've been doing this series of like plain bathroom selfies.
Yeah.
And yeah, I made this whole series last week that I thought was really funny. Of terms of like that got crazy high engagement. I think one of them like one of them got like 200K likes or something of being like this whole series of like slowly getting banned from every
Yeah,
airport. Like
yeah. A joke, I assume, but
yeah, totally. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And uh yeah, I think it'd be funny if I posted something that like is like clearly very slutty in like an airplane bathroom, but I'm worried about getting like shadow banned and be like I took this in Emirates Air. It seems to be the safest so far. Which is just like hilarious because it like only goes to Dubai and like would get you like
Yeah,
beheaded.
yeah. That's a good
And
joke.
yeah, totally. And like but I've like noticed as a result like when I'm wearing something that is more slutty, people like agents and such seem to like have a stronger desire to like waste my time when going through like airport security or like going
Mm.
through like agents will make um more like questions or they'll like TSA officers will like uh be like, oh, like your birthday, that's an interesting birthday. Like, does that mean you're a Virgo? And I'm like, you're a TSA officer. Like, you shut up. Like, what do you like? They're just being polite, but like, what? Like, I'm like stuff like that, where uh, or just like make like comments like, oh wow, you're like only traveling with like that little stuff. Like, where are you going to? And I'm like, can we just do the body scan? Like I'm like like um or like I got in trouble for having my AirPods in my pocket and then they were like, "Oh, like come on, you should know not to have your like AirPods in your pocket." And I was and but I always have my AirPods in my pocket. And like it's like small talk stuff. Like they're just being polite, but like I've noticed that like I don't get this type of like small talk conversation. Um
Oh.
not wearing something as like sexual or as like done up in the airport. Like people
Mm.
will yeah, like it's people will deliberately do uh like almost like perhaps like small talk or like explicitly like or like make comments on my like my like airplane photo um uh like in my like one of my photos I have like braids and they're like, oh, like are those pigtails in your photo? And I'm like, they're like French braids. And they'll be like, oh,
Mm.
I love French braids on women. Like, and I like would never get comments about like my braids before if I was wearing something like less explicitly sexual,
Mhm.
which I think is
Wow.
like interesting. Yeah, because I'm
Yeah.
flying a lot. Like I'm flying like I've had times where I'm flying like 4 times a week or stuff like
Wow.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been like a lot recently. Um, so I'm like have a pretty good data set in terms of like what the different interactions I am, depending on like what I'm wearing. And it's not about like how presentable I am. It's about like how much cleavage I'm showing.
Yeah.
Um, and that seems to be like really interesting, I guess. Like that seems to be like, and one of the things I've noticed is that like I'll get more explicit like free stuff, or I'll have people like normally people will open doors for me, just because I think it's like the polite thing to do. But people will make like if I'm wearing something more sexual, people will open doors and they'll make comments like a woman shouldn't have to open her own door. And I like would not get comments like that otherwise if I was not wearing something as sexual.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I found really interesting. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm like getting like this kind of like sample size of like normal pretty privilege uh interactions, but then I'm getting like people having like desire to do not only like I don't know if they're doing it consciously, like not only desire to do like nice things, but like to like explicitly make like comments or have some type of like personal interaction if I'm like having something more like explicit. Like I think it like signals some amount of like availability. Um
Yeah, because like you know this from it being like isolated. You've isolated this thing down to like your breast being more exposed or not.
yeah.
Um, I like the idea that came up to mind for me. Like this probably all maybe subconscious. Is it that it's clear you can? It's a choice whether to like cover them or not. So you're inviting like just people, the public, like, hey, here's part of my body. Um, I'm inviting an interaction because you could not show them and people wouldn't look as much or do things for you. So people want to like fulfill their half of like the dynamic, like, oh, this woman wants to be, I don't know,
Totally.
doted on or whatever, or
Yeah.
interacted with, someone interact with her.
Yeah, I got into this like once in on the topic of being disagreeable. I got in this like once really like explicit argument with a woman where I said to her, I was like, um, I said something like, uh, you are more likely to get raped if you are wearing something that is like more explicit, if you are wearing like less clothes. And she got really angry about this, like really she was like, no, this is like not like it's not like that's not true, like you're not gonna get raped, like this is not I think she thought that I was like saying that like you were having agency in inviting people to rape you, um
Yeah.
which like I wasn't saying. I was like no, but we have this like all the time with like there being like explicit social rules and like you like or like explicit things that are like signaling certain things, and like this is just like you were like perhaps even if like 1% more likely, like there is a certain amount of like inviting attention by like dressing certain ways that like we are like explicitly aware of. Like you can have a lineup of clothes and have someone reasonably go like point and be like, which of those outfits are the most like uh you know like you could probably do levels to this, like which of
Mhm.
those outfits are outfits that show the most skin, which of those outfits are the ones that show the most amount of like promiscuity, I don't know, mispronounce
Promiscuity.
promiscuity, there we go.
Mhm.
And then like which of those outfits are the most like slutty, and there's different like levels to this. Like I was wearing this, I was with my friend and um I was wearing this like sundress that was like long sleeves, but was like kind of short, and it had like a cut that was like here, but it was like something where like it was off the shoulders, so you could see like my shoulders and my collarbones,
Mhm.
and I was wearing that, and I didn't think it was like particularly slutty because it like it covered a lot of clothing. It was very frilly, but I got a lot of comments about like it looking like outside lingerie. I
Whoa.
think there's a certain amount of like I think the sundress discord is like very interesting. Yeah, like it like looking like outside lingerie. And then I wore like something similar that like objectively showed more skin and was like more form fitting. That was like a long sleeve uh crop top that was like covered to like here, and it like showed my stomach, and I wore it with like a pair of um short shorts, and I said to my friend like, "Oh, is is this is this like I viewed it as like more inappropriate because I was like this is technically showing more skin, and also it was like I wasn't wearing a bra with it, so I was like you could see the outline of my breast from this thing. I was like, is this feels like more slutty, is this appropriate to wear? And I got the reaction like, no, that's like the most like that's definitely more conservative than like that sundress you were wearing. And I was like, what? And like I think there's certain like more sexualized clothing. I imagine this is like partially altered by like all the sundress discord that's like online. Um, but it's
Yeah.
it's interesting uh like that sort of piece of clothing being more sexualized, even though it's like covering more skin, or like showing less explicit sexual parts of your body, just because
Mhm.
there's like some type of like um discourse that we've like created around it.
Mhm.
And like my greater theory, I guess, sort of like tied up, is like this idea of like covert versus like overt sexuality of like covert sexuality seems like quite rewarded and like it seems far superior to like overt sexuality, and it seems like overt sexuality seems to get like a higher immediate like ROI, but like it seems like net negative in terms of like reputational damage or like it's like seems like to be this like uh that would define something as like overt sexuality, such as like tight clothing or like very high heels or like very heavy makeup or like things that obviously when people that are ill-informed about it are like looking at it and they're like that looks like it took you a lot of like effort to like put together to like signal sexual like some type of sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And uh and also like that they're like higher signalers of like some form of like sexuality. Um and then like covert sexuality being things that like people wouldn't immediately um think of as like things that are you are deliberately trying to be sexual for, but like that obviously shows some amount of like sexuality. I think like a really great example of this is like office wear. Like
Mm.
office wear to like me is like extremely sexual. Like it's much more like fitted
Mm.
to your body. It's often tailored. It's meant to be like form hugging. It's often meant to be like lacy and like kind of transparent. It's meant to be like it's something that like is cut in ways to like show collarbones or like is often like a lot of when I was working in an office, like a lot of the stuff is like a lot more sheer, so you can see like you really have to be careful about the bra that you're wearing underneath it. And
Mm.
because it's like sheer and silky, like you can see like linings of like your bra, or you can see your like like straps through it. And it seems like a lot of the clothing is explicitly designed to give some form of like, if you stare at it long enough, or like you watch a woman who's wearing office wear, you can see the form of her body, but there's like some plausible deniability because it's formal wear.
Mm. Feel like everything's covered, or so much is
Yeah,
covered.
everything's
Yeah.
covered. Or
Yeah.
like and it's like all like it's like in this like context of there being like some degree of like professionality
Mm-hmm.
um that I think is just like really interesting. And one of the things that like I've noticed is that like you will get like a lot more people will be kind of like sexually interested in you, but they will not sexually proposition you in as an explicit way if you are wearing like this type of clothing. Like
Unprofessional.
people, yeah, like people will be like interested, like even in non-professional environments. Like if you were like I am when I'm wearing like I never got more people ask me out on the street than when I was working like I worked at a hedge fund for a small bit. So like when I was working at like this hedge fund, like when I would leave work, I would often like walk all the way from like 50th Street like down to Chinatown, and I never got as many people like ask me out on the street or like making small talk like in like a coffee shop or like trying to like explicitly start a conversation with me as I did when I was like, and I imagine it's you're signaling some degree of like wealth and like professionalism and like other like high sexual market value or like high dating market value traits with that, but I never got asked out like so much as when I was wearing that types of clothing, like than I have of
Mm.
like wearing like sundresses or wearing some other type of clothing, like just out and around New York City.
Mm-hmm.
That I thought was like really interesting.
Yeah, I guess like all else being equal, the high-powered hedge fund woman has a higher like girlfriend romantic value than the sundress woman,
Like
I guess is what's going on.
maybe at least in New York City because there's like some. I mean, it's not explicit like what I do for work when I'm wearing like some type of professional clothing. And again like I was like an analyst. Like I was like not like I was working like a dog, and they were like hardly like compared to what I'm making now, like they pay you nothing.
Mhm.
So it's fine. Sundress Woman has higher ROI. I'm defensive. I'm defending Sundress Woman.
Mhm.
Then then and then then like then which I think is kind of funny.
Mhm.
Mm,
I really enjoy that
but
point about like the covert sexuality, or like it sounds like what you're saying was the
yeah.
body shape is a covert sexual
Yeah, totally.
signal. But in American society, I guess at least, it's like totally downplayed beneath like the amount of skin you're showing, or like are your sexual parts like emphasizing what you're wearing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I see like office clothes or an office environment is like so asexual in some ways. Like you have to be professional and like be about whatever work and business. So like the body shape may be right there to be observed and appreciated or
Yeah.
whatever, but it's like it's camouflage in the rest of the whole sexless environment of an office, maybe.
Yeah. There's something about, so I think like I um it's funny that like the most helpful, like the most useful skill I got from that job was like figuring out how to be slutty in an in an environment where you're not meant to be. Like, but I think that's like one of the things that's made me like so good at Twitter. Uh like I think often when I try uh like to explain this to people that like don't aren't familiar with like sex worker Twitter, or like that aren't familiar with like um these types of environments, like they don't, I'll try to like, they'll be like, oh, you just have boobs. Like they'll be like, you have boobs, and like that's what makes you like, and I'm like, have you seen the internet? Like I'm like, have you, like I'm like, it's not like, I mean, I even before I figured this out, like before I kind of like this clicked in the past like 6 months, um and like it's not like my boobs got any bigger. Like I like, but in the past 6 months, I think I've gained almost like 15 or 20,000 followers. Um, and I've had my Twitter for 2 years. So it's like been like for the longest time I like didn't get a ton of engagement and was just posting the things everyone else was posting, which was like, here's this photo of me in a piece of lingerie, and like here's this, like sterile like photo where like I, did a whole photo shoot and I paid like $6,000 to like be in a hotel room, and or like, or you're in a random Airbnb space, and like here's a bunch of photos of me where I'm like wearing lingerie and I'm like posed in like back arching ways.
Mhm.
And very much so now I think that like my Twitter is the type of thing that like I think you legitimately could probably like scroll through my Twitter on the train and be like technically fine. Like like I think it like maybe would get like some looks, but it wouldn't be like it doesn't seem like porny. And
Uh,
but I, or at least like explicitly, I think, yeah, I mean that's, and perhaps that's a reach, but like I think that there's a lot of things like where like I researched even like how the different like LM models work for like how they detect nudity, and like
oh,
what is
interesting.
like, yeah, or like what is like detected. Like there seems to be some amount of like, this was a post that got like no engagement, and I like stopped posting about it, like again, and no one cares about my like good thoughts. But like I posted about like this thing about like how the LLM models seem to work for like nudity detection, like
Yeah.
how it seems it's detecting some element of um like if you have skin, you need to like break it. It can't be like a solid amount of skin. Like it needs to be broken up by like some piece of clothing. Like if you
Hmm.
have like a towel, and therefore you have like the top, your arms showing and your legs showing, but like you have a towel that's in front of you. So like it's not a solid amount of like similarly colored like skin. Or like one of the things that worked really well is like lace, because like human eyes can detect this, but it's not like particularly like captured well of like, oh, where's the nipple and this like,
Mhm.
piece of lace you have over the frame. Or like another thing that I thought was like really good is like stuff like, for example, like butts seem to like be detected more easily than like cleavage for some reason.
Hmm.
Um, so I like stopped posting any like butt stuff. And and like another thing that I think is interesting is like it seems to work better on like lightly colored skin, I imagine, because most of the like most of the porn online you're finding is of like white people, or like lightly colored skin people. So like
Mhm.
it seems to work better on like lightly colored skin than it does on other forms of skin. Um, so like, and then also I imagine it's like perhaps sometimes more high contrast with like a background that you're having. Um, as well as like other stuff like tightly fit clothing like works really well on like the like avoiding the like nudity detection. Um, and other stuff like people seem to be able to get away, this perhaps is just what's reported, but like get away with like swimsuits much more than like actual explicit lingerie. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I just found this like to be like really interesting. Or like stuff like where like one of my photos that got like 4,000 likes was a photo where I'm wearing like a turtleneck that's like down to my like wrists, and a pair of like office trousers, like just
Mhm.
regular cross pattern or whatever you call it. Like, and you can see, but you can see like I'm pulling it in a way that you can like kind of see the shape of my breast and like kind of see like the shape of like my nipples. And I find that like, and that got like crazy high engagement.
Mhm.
And I like made sure to like line, I took like 30 photos or something, and I made sure to like line the lighting up perfectly where like the top of my breast, like the lighting is cut like this way. I guess if this is gonna be audio, you can't see, but like it's cut at like a 45-degree angle. So like the top of like, and it's cut right at the point of like my like nipple. So basically the top form of my breast is colored white and the bottom form of my breast is colored black. And then it makes it for like a really explicit camera contrast. That like an eye can view and be like, wow, that's a breast. But like a camera wouldn't necessarily automatically be, because that's not how they're trained. They're not trained to like be seeing that in terms of and immediately identifying that as like, oh, that type of high contrast image is like meant to like accentuate breasts more. Um, and I think that like even trying to like create this framework of like, okay, it's plausible deniability if you're wearing like a turtleneck, because no one's gonna like um be like that woman shouldn't have had such big breasts. But like it's you're technically covering everything, but it's like form fitting in a way that's like still plausibly like deniable if you're like pulling it in a way. Um, and I also use some of the different forms of uh like Eros, for example, has really strict banning rules on because everything's being verified by a human of like what photos qualify as like being too overtly sexual and which ones don't. So I use like that rule and I like basically like sync that up. And I think I like asked ChatGPT to like basically sync up like which of these would be able to be detectable by like a bot and which of these because they're all like they have to be manually verified. So like which of these can be detected by like a bot and which of these would probably be like able to be detected by like a human eye and then like use like those explicit like rules of like one of the rules they say is that you can't be touching your like underwear like for and this is being viewed by like a it's being manually reviewed by like a human to see whether you are touching your underwear like any sort of like thumb underneath your panties or like thumb like going underneath your bra strap is like implies that you're taking off your clothes so it like for some reason this is not allowed on Eros. So what I did is I like a lot of my images, I'll be touching my like bra strap, like I'll have my like or my dress strap, or I'll be touching like the sort of like top part of my like dress.
Mhm.
And that is like in a way to like imply that I'm taking off my clothes, but will not be like automatically detected by like a bot. I
Wow.
did like a lot of research to this, and I
Clearly.
think it like cracked on Twitter. But like I've tried to explain this to like I tried to explain this to like a guy, and he was like, "You just have boobs. Like I see the
Mhm.
boobs, I click." Like and
Mhm.
and then like a ton of work to like try to figure out. There's like some
Yeah.
other stuff, but like that's one of like my theories of like having this kind of like covert like sexual like images that I really had to like break down like bit by bit and like try to figure out.
Mhm. So I understand this. You're cracked on Twitter because there's a whole underworld, underbelly to the internet and like social media, sexual picture flagging that
Yeah.
you have studied, like kind of isolate like the specific detailed rules and restrictions there and exploited on Twitter. So the
Yes.
humans find your picture is still sexy and titillating and arousing, but algorithms and suppression techniques don't detect it as such.
Yes. That is, I
Wow.
think that's the main thing.
Okay. I thought it was going to be because you learned how to like tell funny jokes or do
No, I still
cool.
haven't figured that out.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
congrats.
I think also my sense of humor, I'm sometimes worried, like my sense of humor is like a little bit dark and it's very, very dry. Like when I'm in person, I like to do this thing where like I'll make a joke and I'll like just like I've done this thing where I like get annoyed or when I'm bored. It's like a very bad thing where like sometimes I like uh explicitly will start saying more and more ridiculous things if a person is annoying me to like or like I would do this sometimes when um like I'll say more and more explicit things that are like kind of ridiculous with like a completely deadpan face. Like I was once in like a bar and I was waiting for my friend and I had flowers for them and I had like a group of guys that like came around me and like were like asking me about like these flowers. They're like, where did you get these flowers from? Who gave you these flowers? And I was like, oh, like just like waiting for my friend, and was like kind of like dry responses. And then I was like, okay, I'm bored. And then I was like, well, I mean, like, if you really want to know, it's like my friend just left her husband at the altar. And they're like, oh my God, really? And I was like, yeah. And the first thing she wanted to do was come to a bar. And they're like, oh wow, like she's coming to a bar now. And I was like, yeah, and she really like she loved red roses. She really loved red roses. And I just thought like it would mean a lot to her. And they're like, why would it mean a lot to her? And I was like, well, because like the reason she left the wedding was because, you know, they fucked up the roses. And they're like, what? How did they fuck up the roses? And I was like, they got all white roses. And I was like, you don't understand. Like in her culture, this is like a sin. This is like the ultimate sin that you can do to like, you know, curse her wedding, to ruin her wedding. She was worried about like the death of her husband. And they're like, oh my God, really? Why? And then I was like, well, like, because her first husband. And I just kept on going
Yeah.
up until the point where they're like, wait, are you serious? Like, and I was getting this group of men is are hitting on me, and they're like not leaving me alone. And so I'm just gonna like wait until my friend gets here. And then my friend came and was like, hey, what's wrong? And like I just thought it was like really amusing. And I think that like that type of like one like elaborate sense of humor I haven't figured out. I kind of figured out with like the like plain posts. I think I might do more series like that. But like my sense of humor is like really dry and like kind of like absurdist and ridiculous. And I
Mm.
haven't figured out a way to be like quippy and like punny in a way that like some other of like my Twitter friends, like there's a Twitter account called like Ellie Voss, and she's like amazing at doing these like quippy sort of she's really lovely. She came to New York and we did like a duo together. But she has like these kind of like quippy, very like punny tweets, and I haven't figured out how to like do that myself, or at least like um I'm not like as good at it. So like I haven't figured out a good way for like my sense of humor, which is like very dry and like a little dark, to like transfer
Mhm.
to Twitter. So I just got like cracked on the Twitter algorithm. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, I'm sure you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
For what
I
it's
still
worth,
have
like
time.
I enjoy like humor that makes like people like work for it a little more. That isn't just like on its face as puns, but
Totally. But like
yeah.
there's also some amount of like I had to figure out also a lot of sentence structure in
Hmm.
terms of like what different forms of like capitalization catch people's eye the most, and also what form of like sentence structure and like how the lines like line up, as well as like what words to use are the most like immediately like sort of like I tried to do this thing where I try to remove as much like as the like I like anything that are like I don't know what the term is, like filler words like that, and how to say a message that's like as short as possible. Because I imagine if like one of the things Twitter rewards is like if something gets like a high engagement, like a high engagement ratio, and this is engagement ratio in terms of anyone clicking on the tweet, clicking, liking, retweeting, commenting, um, then like it will get more sort of like the like algorithm will boost it in some way. So like if you have anything that's like too long or too long to process that has like a photo, then it's like less likely that someone's gonna like actually engage with the photo in other ways because it's like taking an extra second of their time.
Hmm. Yeah. Social media rewards like concision,
Yeah.
efficiency with words.
Yeah.
Hmm. Cool. Um, I know I really enjoyed like understanding your approach there and how you've gamed the system. Well, I'm gonna look at my list of questions that are about womanhood. Kind of danced around it, but I'll look for it more directly here. Um, what are your favorite things about being a woman?
Um, I've thought about this. I think that like I think that like my sort of like experience is gonna be skewed because like I'm like I'm, coming from the experience of obviously um I'm not sure like how much of the things that I like about being a woman are like things that are explicit to like my experience that can be like really tied. Like uh I like I'm coming from like a position of being like white and tall and like skinny and
Hmm.
like I come from like a relatively like wealthy background. So I think like
Hmm.
it's hard to kind of sometimes tie like how much of the things I like about being a woman are things that like I like of being like I like about being from a woman from like those background stuff.
Yeah, is it like because you're a woman or because you're Adelyn that you enjoy these things
Yeah, totally.
or get to?
Um yeah, I think also like there's a lot of stuff um like I think one of the things that uh so I went to like specialized and like gifted schools my whole life, and I noticed that like my experience really changed when I hit puberty in terms of like my experience in these schools. Um because like people were when I hit puberty, people were much more like incentivized to like socially interact with and do a lot of these like explicit sort of um like explicit interactions of like or like favor interactions. Like I noticed uh and I noticed this at like different points of my like education. Like I was I guess like I noticed this in like high school of like people like just trying to like be like, hey, like let's study for this exam together, like in a way that I didn't experience, or like, hey, like do you want my homework? Like even as explicit as that, or like, oh, do you want help on that project? That made it like really unreward, like much that made those interactions like a lot easier. I was like, oh, I'm being like literally incentivized to like not do my work. This is like fucked. Um, and then like in college, like I was taking a lot of I started out like majoring in like chemistry and physics, and I was in like a lot of STEM classes that were like mostly men, and I would have men kind of do stuff like come up to me and be like, hey, if you want like help with the homework or if you want like help studying with the exam. And I was like cool. I was like I was like when they listed the scores, I was like the top, like I was in the top like 5 percentile. Like I got a 98 on the last exam. I don't, if you want help, like you're welcome to have help as well. I mean, I didn't say that first part. I would just be like, yeah, I did really well in the last exam, so if you want help as well, like let me know. And that was like a little bit frustrating being in like classes that were like old men and having that experience. um I guess like so my answer is like would kind of be like I think that like a lot of the things like I've been like offered and like sort of like given as like privileges of like being a woman and being like an attractive woman are like probably like net good for a lot of people. But I think for a while I kind of just wished I was like a dude so I didn't have to like deal with them or
Hmm.
like deal with like a lot of like explicit sexual like propositions.
Yeah.
Um, but I think also like there's been like I think also like now in my kind of career, uh like like I'm objectively doing better than like most men I know, like financially and in terms of like how I've set up my life. And those are completely on the basis of like being a woman. Most like I don't think any men could do what I'm doing. Um
Yeah.
and also being like an attractive woman. That's like kind of screwed it a little bit. But there definitely is this feeling of like feeling like I like uh again kind of sexist take, but like I often feel like in society like women are like rewarded for being like they're kind of thought of as like secondary to men, or like they're rewarded for like the women that are successful still have to have a lot of these like um typical like stereotypical like female beauty standards uh in addition to whatever they're doing independently. um
Hmm.
and it's been like I guess like difficult trying to like separate those, or like sometimes I feel like I've like turned my life into like being this like okay, well if women are like prizes in some way, like how can I be like the best prize?
Oh
Like how
yeah,
can I
you're like
the
professionally a prize.
Yeah, I'm like
Yeah.
so like many people would like disagree with this, and they'd be like, no, like sex work is like independently empowering because like I like the third wave feminism, which is like the way that I empower myself is like I don't shave my legs, like I work in an office job and I like fuck a ton, like and like these are empowering because these are things that men like that I like kind of have a problem with. Like I think it's like a little bit like wait, what's wrong with like doing the things that are like feminine? Why are like those like bad things to do? Um, but I also feel like even explicitly when I was saying earlier, uh, like Trist has created like a sexual market value where it's like the traits that are valued in men most are like success and like intelligence and wealth. And like where do those people go? Like when they have all their money and like what are men often told that they're getting all their money for? It's like to get like a beautiful wife or like a beautiful girlfriend. And like I feel like I've like professionally rigged that to like be the most like high prize like the thing that like the most successful man wants. And like figure out how to like rig those in all the like right ways. And all of this is like super nice, and I'm like super happy with my life. But it's definitely feeling like this, like sometimes like looking at the system and being like, okay, what are all the things that are like how does all of this work, and how can I like rig this to like be most beneficial for like the attributes I've been given and the like privileges I've been given, and like rig
Mm.
this to like create the best life for myself.
Yeah, in some sense, you're like responding to the uh, financial sexual market you exist in.
Yeah,
Um, mm,
little.
mm,
Like, that's nice. It's fun.
mhm.
Um, yeah, I've had fun with it. Um,
Yeah, at the same time, I can see how everything you mentioned is kind of a double-edged sword. Like it's been really nice and really shitty. Both are
yeah,
true.
yeah. I think also like for example, like there's a lot of elements of like traditional Twitter that like I've seen other people who have less sexualized bodies, like they have less curvaceous bodies or they have less like less large breasts, and they're able to get away with like a lot more nudity on Twitter. That I
Mm,
found like I would have similar posts to what other providers or other like famous Twitter accounts would post. As a result, I think that like so one of the things that people have gotten frustrated with is that a lot of the like biggest porn stars have kind of childish bodies, and
mm,
people have gotten really upset about this. And I don't know if this is an actual incentive of like men like children. I think this is more so like what Twitter algorithms will like immediately flag as porn are more sexualized bodies. So like Twitter algorithms or like TikTok algorithms or like any of these like online algorithms, they will flag more sexual bodies as like porn. So as a result, like the people that do the best and have the largest amounts of growth are people that have less sexualized bodies. And I found that like more explicit ways of posting that I've seen other people be able to like get away with, like a full bikini photo that would just get like from me get immediately tagged as like pornography or like a
yeah.
nudity. And I
Mm,
found this like really frustrating and like made me really angry. Um and I find that like as a result, I have to be like a lot more covertly sexual like online because otherwise it will be flagged immediately as nudity or as like adult content.
mm, mm. Okay. Do you experience any societal expectation or pressure related to the feminine roles of being a girlfriend or a wife or a mother?
Um I guess I've not yet been I have not been a wife or a mother yet. Um, but uh I don't really know. I mean, I think that um I have like one of the people I was like dating recently like directly set me up with like someone who I did a ton of Twitter consulting with. And I ended up like sleeping with them. So like I think that the relationships I'm in are probably a little they knew that like I was like I'm like, oh, your friend is sitting on me, and they like found it funny. And I ended up sleeping with their friend who was doing a ton of Twitter consulting with me. So I think that like perhaps as a result, like the like relationships I'm in are a little bit like untraditional. Um, or like I mean, I even like the way that I met like Ayla originally was because I filled out like a date me form for Nate Suarez, like who's one of her partners. And like I filled out like a survey and ended up being like a survey girl, and kind of became involved in like that whole scene. Um, and like I think the relationships I'm in are probably like a little bit non-traditional initially. So like it's hard to see like what the things that are being like um kind of infringed on that. Like everyone I've like dated, like even the like quant person I dated, uh who like knew explicitly what I did for work and like kind of like found it like interesting. Like they kind of like when I first saw that, they're like, huh, okay, like how does that work? Like do you have any interesting stories or like what are your clients like? Or like um, I think that has been uh that's been like kind of like I've had non-traditional relationships where I'm not sure if I've like been able to see or perhaps been like if they have I've been like oblivious to it because of like, some form of autism or something to like of the like roles and expectations that have like been given to me.
Hmm. Yeah, you're doing your own thing. You haven't been punished for it.
Yeah, not yet. Still time.
Yeah. Is there anything you're ashamed of wanting?
Um, uh, hmm. I think I have like um some desire to be like trad in like weird ways. I think that's like a weird juxtaposition of like me. Like I have like some sort of like aversion to like heavy poly or like heavy kink cultures. Not like a problem to it, just like not a direct engagement in it. Um, or like uh some element of like I'm bisexual, but I'm like very feminine and like don't really like uh and like I'm attracted to like very feminine women also. I think that like perhaps like in the circles that I'm in, sometimes those are like a little bit more taboo. Like I think it was like definitely like in the circles that I've been in, like I'm like often like explicit about the fact that like I am like uh a sex worker, but I'm not explicit about the like corporate work that I've done. Like I'm like hedge fund. Like I'm just like I'm like it was like was like I feel like almost like shame about the like more trad stuff I've done, like where I
Hmm.
like feel uh like like sort of like I have to be a more sort of um like more sort of like secretive about those like parts of me almost, which is like a heavy like dichotomy to I think what most people's experience and like sort of life is.
Yeah, it's a fun subversion. You're very open about the sex work, but not as
Yeah.
much about the quant past.
Yeah.
Your
I
sordid
was,
hedge fund
never
past.
I was never one.
Oh, sorry,
And
analyst.
also like even when I worked at like a hedge fund, it was like non-traditional in a lot of ways, and I was on there for under a year. So like it's definitely it was definitely like my little teetering into all of this stuff and being like, oh, this sucks. Um, there is definitely some aversion also to the like traditional life in a lot of ways that I feel like um sort of more um like there is some element of like aversion to like traditionalness that like I feel in myself, or perhaps that's like um yeah, that I feel in myself, but also like for a lot of the circles I'm in, I almost feel like more traditional in a lot of ways of like yeah. Mm.
Is that
Yeah.
being like you're not in the slut cloud?
um
Um,
I've had my points in the slut cloud. I found some very enticing nerds. I've but yeah. I definitely I find like this kind of like this pull in me of like towards like traditionality, and then also uh like I almost find that um like if I'm like a little bit like for a while I was like part of just a bunch of different social groups, like social scenes, like like SF tech scenes and AI scenes and like good like sex parties, and then I would like also go to like far right debates, and I would like also be going to like crypto parties and in New York City and elsewhere, and then also like sex work stuff and also like a lot of my friends are, in their 30s and married with kids and like, very trad in a lot of ways. Or like my best friend, two of my really close friends, one of them is like um a Muslim, like never kissed anyone, like, and she's one of my closest like friends from school. Um, and like still like a virgin, never dated anyone. And another one of my friends is like a born again Christian who's like with her boyfriend and like waiting till marriage.
Hmm.
And I like tend to like I have this like philosophy that like if every group I'm in, I'm like a little bit like off kilt. I think I'm doing something right. Like you're coming to like some type of center of like being a little bit uh of an like a little bit oppositional in every type of oppositional group you're a part of. I think you're doing
Hmm.
something right.
Oh yeah, it's like if you're kind of an outsider or like not super the modal person in any group you're in, you're actually well balanced.
Yeah, totally.
You're doing all kinds
Yeah.
of different groups.
Yeah. That's kind of like my philosophy on life in a lot of different ways.
Cool.
Yeah. I also, I'm getting a little bit, I'm getting a little bit tired.
Okay, let me
I have
skip
a flight
to.
early tomorrow, but,
Cool. Can I
is,
skip to a final like couple pair of
yeah, sure.
questions?
Any like
Yeah.
ground.
Yeah. One from the last one I had this flavor of conversation with. Uh, these are a handful of questions, whatever stands out to you. Just want to know, do you experience resentment towards other women? What causes the resentment? Where do women feel each other and how do you deal with that? I guess we kind of covered that earlier
Hmm.
on. Hmm. Okay. What's a question you would like to hear other women answer?
Hmm. I think the resentment towards other women is like interesting. I think I've definitely felt some type of like resentment of like this feeling of like this like pre-identity screening that I've experienced. Like I think one of the things that like is really interesting is like I thought this is like really interesting even in like the screening of sex work where like uh because of the like identity screening that women do, like women often feel um like uh like you'll get like references and people will often have like heavy preference for references of like wanting to like know like hey like I know that person, like I know that provider, like what was your experience with this person, and like almost have a preference or like have some type of like inclination towards that over like legal information. And like the men often feel like, oh my God, I'm giving up this like legal information that like, this feels very like strong to me, this like thing. And often I think the way that women like validate each other or like people in like dating or friendship, it's like, oh no, the like way to validate other people is almost more um is like almost more significant than the legal information. And I think often like men feel like the legal information has like a lot of implications, but like it really like it's pretty secure and like there's not a lot that's being done with it besides like it being kept in case anything bad happens. But women are like
Hmm.
really checking like some form of like blacklists or like some form of like social screening validation that like is like a lot more, there's like this kind of like difference. And I think sometimes like on a personal level I've felt like, I think I covered this a little bit, but like I'm like, oh damn it, I wish I could just like be immediately like uh verified based off of like the person that I come as immediately, or like the like crazy shit I say, instead of some element of like, oh, Sarah, and Sarah is cool, so like therefore you must be cool too. um yeah, I guess also I'm trying to think of like a question that I have for other women. um
Hmm.
I guess I like would just really be interested in like what the ways women are like connecting with each other and what the ways that women have like developed a lot of their like new social connections or like social friends, or like if this is like a universal experience of like the way women validate each other, like, or like verify each other. That's definitely like something I'm curious about, if this is like an experience that like I'm uniquely bad at in terms of figuring it out as like if there's like a cheat code, like, oh, like some special word you can say and then it's like, you like you got it. uh that I like, or if like what the general experience is, because I've ended up like um I like for a while was doing this thing when I first moved to New York where I would like try to talk to like two strangers a day, like have a meaningful conversation with like two strangers a day. Um, and would like stop like I'd be in like a ramen shop and I'd like have a conversation with like the person next to me. Or I like would be like in the sauna of my gym and I'd like try to have a conversation, new conversation with the person every single day when I went to the gym. And I found that like I never developed a female friendship from that, even if I had like an hour-long conversation with someone. It would
Mm.
kind of be this being like, oh, like, can I get your number? And then being like, yeah, sure. And then like nothing ever leads to it. Like, or like following up being like, hey, like, like you want to get coffee again or something? And that never led to anything. But definitely have had like a super high ROI of just randomly being introduced from people. Or like, oddly enough, I've met like a lot of close female friends from like guys I dated where they were like, you would like this other female friend I have. And I've
Mm.
had like a ton of friends that like had like really high ROI from that versus like the people that I like explicitly had like face-to-face interactions with and that like never turned it from anything. I don't know. I'm curious if that's like a universal experience.
Oh, yeah, like almost a referral system or some kind of
Totally.
social or
Yeah,
intellectual credit where you can like bypass
big time.
default modes of connecting just by knowing the person or knowing the thing, whatever it
I
is.
think- Yeah, that's the cheat code for sure.
Cool. I like it. Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about or share that we hadn't got to in this conversation?
No, I don't think so. I'm happy with the like kind of ADHD conversation form.
Yeah, yeah. I enjoyed it as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's about it. Alan, I appreciate you taking this time to share so much of your life and your unique perspective with me and the audience. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for interviewing me. This has been great. This has been super fun.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, you as well.
Take care.
Bye.